Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. For all those keeping score, I ran out of psukim in the parsha to discuss yesterday. So what I would like to do, I would like to just share with you excerpts from a few other commentators that we normally don't speak about, a little bit further about the idea of the garments of the Kohanim, of the priests. The first is an excerpt from a commentary from Shamshon Raphael Hirsch. You'll forgive me, I had to choose between the Hebrew version that I had in front of me in the Sefer or the original German, and I just thought some of you would understand the Hebrew better. Okay, so Rav Hirsch says as follows, Big Day Kahuna, Rak al Yada Miskahin HaKohen, V'yotze mitoch pratiuso Meleis HaChesronos. Only through the garments that the priests were given could an individual Kohen leave his specific mode full of whatever his personal flaws would be. Beged karov lefokad. A very interesting thing. There's an idea, Rav Hirsch writes about this extensively. We know, of course, that in the Hebrew language, generally speaking, roots have 3 letters. And there's an interesting theory that if roots share 2 of the 3 letters, that the meaning and the intent behind the roots are related in some way. Now, he's doing something a little bit different here. He's pointing out that beged and the beged, which means a garment, and the shoresh for pokad, pekuf dalid, which is to be given a charge, are related, not because they share 2 letters, they only share 1 letter, but beis and fei are beis and pei, bet and pet and pay, excuse me, are similar sounds. That was unintentional. And gimel and kuf have somewhat of a similarity in terms of how the sounds are made. So he says a garment is related to a sense of a charge. Habgadim misamlim kosher musari. The garments for the Kohanim represent a certain spiritual message. Shekei nitnu lo adam midei abore kedei lahatzilo mitos bahamis. That these garments are given to a person from the Creator, meaning God, to save the person from animalistic conduct. You know, in the end of the day, we're a composite between physicality and spirituality. And there are all kinds of things we do, whether it be that we're exactly acting like animals, think large, kiddish, crammed room, that sometimes might happen, or we're more sophisticated animals. Think about what a person might do if their own honor is at stake. And we think so much of ourselves and not of other people. So the garment of the Kohen is a uniform to remind the wearer that he has to live up to a much loftier cause here. Halvisha misamelas knisa ishius l'toch mala o ofim yuchadim. Very, very similar to what Howard and Scott were discussing yesterday. That this uniform helps a person understand that they need to rise to a greater cause. Bigdei HaKahuna mevatim came as ofi HaKahuna. So the garments, it's more than just a nice uniform. It really expresses the unique charge of the Kohen. V'lochein iser hachatzitza bahem. A Kohen needs to wear these garments, and a Kohen may not have anything between these garments and his flesh. In other words, let's say a Kohen says, well, you know, I really just like to wear, I've got this undershirt I really like to wear, I have these pants I like to wear. I'll wear all the garments, but I'll just wear them over those things. That's not okay. Because these garments, it's a departure from his normal mode. He's living up to a whole different thing. V'shetzrichim tzviya lishma, a very interesting thing. Part of the beauty of the garments, you can already see it from Debbie's background, part of the beauty of the garments was the dye used, the coloring used for the garments. So it's the parts that were wool and like. So the halacha is that the garments have to be colored, dyed with the mitzvah of the garments of the Kohanim in mind. In other words, you can't just take it to the dyeing store and just give them that, and just the person who does it, just like the construction of the begadim, but even the coloring of the begadim, have to be with a very specific focus. The person has the mitzvah in mind. And why is that so important? Well, Rav Hirsch suggests the reason it's so important is because what these garments represent, it's more than just a nice thing to wear at the time. It represents a charge. And the more sanctity that's imbued into the garments, the more hopefully the wearer of the garments, whether it be a mystical thing that it inspires the person, whether it be just an intellectual thing. Wow, think of how much effort went into the creation of this garment. Think of how much spiritual energy went into the creation of this garment, and I've got to live up to that. It was all made for me, and I've got to do it the right way. The garments make the Kohen eligible to do this service. A really interesting angle as well. So you have the Kohen serving in the Mishkan, but he's not the one who made the garments. Someone else from the nation made the garments. And he's only allowed to serve when he's wearing those garments. Lefichach mevatim bigdei kahuna esatchunos shemimusha nidrash aydei mikdash Torah Hashem b'todo asa uma ve'mesamlu mesakadusha shemikdash mashral adam Yisrael mitzapa sheyisav eleha. So not only are the garments of the Kohen important to elevate him and inspire him, but the fact that someone else made the garment and now he's presented with the garment represents that this unique charge that he has is in representation of the Jewish people. So a lot of this fits into what we discussed yesterday, but I thought it was an interesting thing to think about. Okay, the next comment I would like to read is something from the Netziv, also a later commentator, and it's on the word lekadsho, to sanctify him, that the wearing of the garments sanctify the Kohen. On this, the Netziv says, Shabegadim Yisayu lo liskadesh. These garments will help him become sanctified. V'chol davar shebekdusha tzarich asiya lishma. Everything having to do with sanctity needs to be made with that specific mitzvah in mind, like we discussed with Rav Hirsch. The kama shemechavnim yoser moil yoser l'tachlis. It's just one step further of what we mentioned a moment ago. He suggests that the more pristine the focus and intent was in the creation of the garment, the more elevating the garment is for the wearer of the garment. V'lochein yidaber Moshe ba'atzmo aleihem. And that's why, says the Netziv, Moshe Rabbeinu gives personal instructions to the makers of the garments. It's not just about what the Kohen wears. It's about what the creators of the garment make and their focus with doing it. There's something very, very beautiful about that, particularly because, of course, there was a limited range of people who were eligible to serve in the Mishkan, a very limited range. It was just Kohanim. And the idea, there's something I think very moving about this, that part of what elevates the Kohen and part of what gives the Kohen the charge is all of the beautiful intentions that some person in some back room had when they were creating the garment. And that's something to think about. Okay, another thing. This is from the Shiurei Das, famously referred to as the Tetzaveh Rav. It's somewhere in my contract that I have to quote the Tetzaveh Rav at least 3 times a year. Rebbeinu Zichrono Livracha was always okay. The Tetzaveh Rav says as follows: V'alkein amra Torah v'yasisa lichavod ulisifaris. I actually did speak about this pasuk a little bit earlier in the week. Talks about the purpose of the garments being made was for honor and splendor. If you remember, we grappled with it a little bit at the time. We had even some discussion about it after the formal session. What does that mean for honor and splendor? Is it so that he should just feel like he's worth $1 million? I mean, what does that mean? So one pshat had to do with this way of honoring God. And another pshat had to do with that there should be a sense of like an aura in the room. When people are in the Mishkan, when people see the Kohen, they feel, wow, this is a great thing. Let's see what he says. Ki afsh in bigdi akahuna midasam umatchunasam henal pisodos ramim v'nisoyim. What are the deeper meanings of the garments that the Kohen would wear? We don't know from such things. They're very lofty. We've discussed a few ideas over this week, but only God really understands all these things. And the people deeply steeped in Torah knowledge and theology and philosophy can understand certain things. B'chozos hayanasa gam l'chavod l'sifares. She gam b'hidur chitzoni v'tiferes. So he says, don't get confused. When it says that the purpose of these garments is for honor and splendor, that's a purpose of these garments. We've spoken this week about that this garment atones for this sin and that garment atones for that sin. That doesn't sound like honor and splendor. He says there's two parallel tracks. That there's deep ideas behind each of these garments, but there's also a simpler idea that it should just create a general sense of aura in the Mishkan. God said it should be honorable garments. God told Moshe that he should convey that directly to the people. It should be l'chavod u'sifares. B'chozos tzibalo shelachach me'lev lo yazkir klal me'inyan kavod v'tiferes rak shiyasu l'kadsho l'chanoli. It's a fascinating observation. We mentioned in the previous comment that Moshe spoke directly to the Chachmei Lev, the wise-hearted people who would create the garments and the important task that they had. So the Tetzaveh says, when you look at what God tells Moshe to tell the makers of the garments, he doesn't talk about l'chavod u'sifares. He doesn't talk about honor and splendor. All he says is that these garments will sanctify the Kohen to serve God. So if there's an idea that they should be really beautiful and really splendid, why in the world wouldn't you tell the crafters of these garments that directive? Why'd you leave that out? V'hu mishum shema oskim b'meleches hakodesh sheyitzrichim lasos b'kavana kedosha utahora u'liyachid yichudim al kol avoda v'avoda kedei shetachul al maaseh mashras hashchina. They had a very steep task. They had to imbue these garments with sanctity. And as we said before, the more they think of the sacred nature of what's going on, the more they focus on it, the more potent these garments would be. You know, this is not a criticism, it's just a reality. Every artist at whatever they do, it could be performing, it could be creating, every artist wants to do a good job. And of course, it somehow comes in. Obviously, the more beautiful job you do, the more impressed people will be. We're all human beings. So the goal is to have beautiful garments. But he suggests that the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't talk to the makers of the garments about that is because he just wants them to focus on the sanctity of what they're doing. I think this just dovetails nicely with what we discussed earlier. So these are three ideas, a little bit more to think about in terms of the significance of the garments. And I think actually in all three of the comments, what also came out is an appreciation of the makers of the garments. And I think that's a decent mashal for a lot of what we do in life. A lot of times, generally speaking, all the cliches aside, generally speaking, whoever's in the front, whoever's making the speech, whoever's doing the deed, there are people behind the scenes who are making it all happen. And so thinking of the creators of the garments, I think is an interesting thing to reflect on.